5 years. 5 long years. That's how long we've waited following the loss of Halo 5. At first it seemed hopeless. Then trailer after trailer, good decision after good decision eventually led to the gameplay reveal of Halo Infinite. And I gotta say, I'm excited. Hey guys, how you doing? I'm Void Ranger. Welcome. It's been a few days since we got our first look at Infinite, and as I said in the lead-in, it's been 5 years since the last main series Halo game released, and that game was Halo 5 Guardians. Halo 5 had some issues. Following the poor reception to the direction 343 decided to take Guardians, they needed to go back to the drawing board for the next game, which they did, over the course of half a decade. It was during this evaluation period that something beautiful and unexpected happened. A Halo game released to nearly universal praise, and it got many excited for the future of the series again. This game put an interesting twist on the series with a new villain that was not just another Covenant, and it had a mix of classic and new art styles. This game was, of course, Halo Wars 2, and it's pretty clear at this point just how much Infinite has drawn from the success that was this game. And in addition to Halo Wars 2, it seems 343's soul-searching took them all the way back to the beginning, where they took a very serious look at the game that started it all, Halo Combat Evolved. Just from looking at the opening moments of gameplay, it's quite clear 343 wanted to invoke a sense of CE nostalgia, which is great as far as I'm concerned. While I'd expected to get some CE vibes from this demo, based on the fact that 343 themselves say this game is sort of a soft reboot to the series, it seems CE and Halo Wars 2 are not the only games whose DNA can be seen within Infinite's gameplay demo. And no, I'm not talking about Doom Eternal. That much should be pretty obvious already. Halo is now open world, an unexpected turn for the series, but one that, if handled well, could be very, very interesting. And when watching this gameplay, the style to the world design and how the player interacts with it reminds me of another game that has arguably redefined the open world genre since its release in 2017. The game is Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Now, I know, that sounds crazy, right? What am I talking about? Well, just hear me out before you click off the video. Still here? Cool. I promise this might end up making sense. Maybe. Now, we're not talking about general gameplay here. I don't expect Master Chief to be fighting the Banished with a soup ladle and a pot lid, though it'd be pretty entertaining if he did. No, we're talking solely about overworld design here, and core to Breath of the Wild's world design is something called the Triangular Rule, a term coined by Breath of the Wild's development team. The Triangular Rule refers to the use of triangular geometric structures in the environment to break up the gameplay and give the players options on how they can interact with the world around them. For example, in the distance you can see the top of a place you wanted to go to, be it a tower, building, mountaintop, whatever, but the world design prevents you from having a clear line of sight to the base of your target. You can place a marker on the location and set out, but along the way you'll have to make some choices, such as, do I go around this mountain to get there? Do I go over it? Maybe some combination of the two. And once you've overcome an obstacle, you may discover some new location along the way that you want to visit even more than the area you originally set out to travel to. This turns what would otherwise be a boring point A to point B into its own little mini adventure with lots of twists and turns along the way. These triangles also serve to tuck away secret areas, rewarding the player for seeking them out or simply stumbling upon them. Now, let's take a look at a couple stills from the demo and see if we can find any similar designs. To demonstrate what I'm talking about, we'll mark the top of the furthest geometric structures in red. Now note that you can't actually see many direct paths to these places. You can see some places you might want to venture to, but not many clear paths to them, as they're all obscured by obstacles occupying the world space. We'll mark these in green. And in this still, you can get an even better look at this. Most of what breaks up the skyline here are triangular structures, and there's quite a few of them. And yes, I know, this happens in the real world as well, but when you look at these landscapes, there really does seem to be some intent to the layout here. Now, having a world with lots of vertical space thoughtlessly and needlessly can serve to artificially prolong a journey and can actually hinder gameplay experience. The following were the thoughts of one of Breath of the Wild's world designers regarding walls, stated in an interview. Yes, at first I was told that you can climb over walls, but a landscape designer's sense of walls is somewhere you can't go, and therefore being able to climb them makes what once were walls into paths. Interesting. Breath of the Wild, as stated above, got around this verticality problem by allowing the player to climb walls. Except when it's raining, of course. So, how does Halo Infinite tackle these vertical spaces? A grappling hook, or grappling shot as it's officially called, a name ironically reminiscent of the hook shot, which served a very similar purpose for the older Zelda games, a similarity I honestly believe to be coincidental, by the way. This will be opening up a whole new way for players to interact with the sandbox, and I can't wait to see how that all unfolds, and it should also make for some really fun times, especially in co-op, for exploring around the ring. And while on the subject of grappling hooks, there's another game that might have served as some inspiration for Infinite. About a week before the Xbox event, a friend sent me some supposedly leaked info about Infinite that made me laugh at first. The supposed leak claimed that Infinite had taken significant inspiration from Halo CE, which we already knew, and that it also had taken inspiration from Metroid Prime. I'm sorry, what? It claimed Infinite would feature a large open world to explore, grappling hook, and various upgrades, visors, and lore to discover deep within the ancient Forerunner structures of the ring, with puzzles and challenging fights with heavily reworked Promethean defenders the deeper you delved. Well, okay, the open world was already speculated about, and so was the grappling hook, but I saw no signs of any abilities that could be upgraded, or lore entries, or special visor modes. Oh, wait a second. Alright, let's take a look at this Metroid Prime. What is this game exactly? Metroid Prime is about exploring and puzzle solving at its core. As a game, it actually bears very little in common with Halo. The world serves as a giant interconnected puzzle box, with new paths to embark upon as you, the player, unlock new abilities and upgrade old ones. Metroid Prime's world design could not be further than that of the game we already talked about, Breath of the Wild. Where Breath of the Wild was built upon freedom and massive environments, Metroid Prime is the opposite, sporting bleak, often foreboding, and very claustrophobic play spaces, filled with low ceilings and dark ruins packed with the lore left behind by the now vanished aliens that built them. But who's to say a game can't have both of these kinds of styles of world spaces at the same time? Well, it's obvious 343 wants a big open world, which at least to me seems to have taken some cues from Breath of the Wild. We have to remember that this is still Halo. That means ancient alien ruins, as well as the possibility of fighting both Prometheans and the Flood. So I think it's reasonable to assume that there will still be some dark underground places in the game as well. So what I think was really cool about Metroid Prime is that as you start exploring the world, you get the sense that there are a lot of places that you can't quite get to just yet, and as you progress through the game, you find more and more upgrades for your suit that grant you more and more abilities to go and explore the world around you. Often entirely new areas will open up to you in places you've already been to several times, adding more and more depth with every visit. I think this could be kind of cool for a Halo game as well. Maybe not for the story, but in Free Roam, for example, where every time you visit this place, you can dive deeper and deeper. Maybe even a place like the Primordial Cell, or part of the Palace of Pain. With every new floor unlocked, it gets dirtier and fouler as the clean architecture of the Forerunners gives way more and more to the corruption of the Flood. It would be kind of awesome. You gotta admit, that could be kind of cool. Metroid Prime is a game that came out in 2002 on the GameCube, only 1 year after Combat Evolved released on the original Xbox. To overcome technical limitations, everything in that game is broken up into smaller play areas connected by doors. Each door has a corresponding beam upgrade that opens it sort of like a key. Then there's the grapple beam, which allows you to access areas you otherwise would not be able to reach. There's the wave beam, which when combined with the thermal visor can be used to charge up unpowered doors, the x-ray visor, which allows the player to see secret paths and to track special enemy types that can turn invisible, and a bunch more upgrades and abilities packed into this game as well. But while we're on the subject of different visor modes in Prime, I feel like it's worth noting that Halo has had a couple in the past as well, and I think gameplay-altering visors could work really well in the sandbox of Halo's campaign, highlighting power pathways, revealing secret passages behind walls, and of course night vision and thermals. There are so many possibilities, and we could finally get a use for all those visors introduced in Reach and continued on into newer games that already have in-universe purposes and descriptions. It's great. Now, as for how Forerunner upgrades in a UNSC suit could work from a lore angle, I think 343 has a few ways they could actually go about that, but I'm going to go ahead and bet on that Mjolnir Gen 3 has reverse-engineered Forerunner tech built into it already. And I'm basing this off the apparent hard light shielding seen around Chief's view when his shields recharge. And to be fair, the original Mjolnir Mark V variant had reverse-engineered Covenant tech, so it's not really beyond the realm of possibility that the UNSC and Oni and Halsey could do something like this. And I'm probably going to make a video on this all on its own later, but I figured a little brief description of how I think that these things will be explained in game was appropriate given everything we've talked about and the rest of the theory crafting in this video. So forgive the little lore rant there for a second. Alright, last thing I wanted to mention is that a fair amount of people have wanted a sort of codex of little lore entries to be in a Halo game for a little while now. This is something we might actually be getting if the database screen we see in the map menu is anything to go by. And yet again, this is something Metroid Prime did very, very well, having loads of descriptions of enemies, local wildlife, history entries, and more for the lore-hungry players to dive into. And with a lore-heavy series like Halo, I think something similar would make a lot of sense, so that us lore nerds can get tons and tons of info to discover, discuss, and to make videos on, while the average player can just enjoy the game without interruption. Right, here we are at the end of the video. So, it goes without saying that this has largely just been conjecture and theory on my part, and an excuse to talk about cool game design to nerd out over Halo. So, go ahead and leave some of your feedback in the comments below. I'd be curious to see what you have to say. This is my first video on this channel, also my first video of this type, this kind, you know, scripted and edited. Of course, this outro is completely ad-libbed, and it shows because it's even more rambly than the video. But yeah, I'd be very curious to see what your feedback is, any potential critiques or things I can improve on other than the audio. Just things like that. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe leave it a like. If you stuck around through all my ramblings and rants and whatnot. And yeah, I guess that's it. So I guess I'll see you guys on the next one, hopefully.